Hello and welcome to what will surely be the final weekly brief episode of 2025 and the real first weekly brief getting us all ready for the next legislative session. I'm Robbie Feinberg. I'm the director of communications and government relations for the Maine School Management Association. And today, I just want to talk you through what we can expect for the second legislative session of the 132nd legislature. The session is going to get underway right at the beginning of January, and it will be going nearly full stop. So we have plenty that we want to share with you regarding issues we're watching, bills we're watching, in ways that you can stay involved and connected over the course of the session. So I'll share my screen right now to help you follow along. And here we go, the weekly brief, a primer for the second legislative session. So, first, I wanted to give just a brief look at where we are currently at in the legislative process. So, as I mentioned, we are in the 132nd legislative session. As you probably know, we wrapped up the first session that came last year, largely in 2025. And in January, beginning right around January 7th, is when we will start up the second legislative session of the 132nd legislature. Now, this session is what's known as the short session, and it is described that way because in statute, in law, it is considered to start and end in a more condensed time frame than that first session. So it'll actually start up in January, and it is projected to end in April, right around, I think it's the third Wednesday in April. Whether it actually ends on that date, we will see. Whether there have to be special sessions, we will see what happens regarding that. But for now, that is our rough time frame. It will be a roughly 3.5 month process. And there will be many big issues that we will be watching for. Now, in terms of how this works, there are different rules for bills in this session. So you might remember in the first session, any legislator can really propose any bill at all. And so that resulted in more than 2,000 bills over the course of the first session. The rules are very different here. They're much more limited. So bills can really only be brought about if they're connected to the budget, if they are of what is considered an emergency nature, if they are connected to a study that in some way connected to another bill in some way that allowed for another bill to be introduced. There are ways of having this come through. And then also the different agencies are allowed to also introduce their bills, the different state agencies. But it is a much more stringent process. Bills have to go before the Legislative Council, which is made up of state leaders, legislative leaders from both parties. And that council ultimately determines whether a bill goes through, whether it can be entered in this legislative session, or whether it is not allowed to be added. So those are the rules for bills, and we are certainly still expecting a couple hundred more bills to come through this session. But also, we will still be dealing with a few hundred bills that were carried over from the last session, and we will get into those as well. And then we also still have bills on the appropriations table. So this was where this is basically over the course of the last session. Many bills, dozens of bills were passed by the House and the Senate, but they were put on that appropriations table. And that's where the Appropriations Committee then determines which of those bills ultimately get funding. Because as a state, we have limited funding. And so it's really up to the Appropriations Committee to determine whether or not those bills are going to get funding, which ones did. So some of those bills did get funding. They ultimately did pass, but then we still have many bills that are left on the appropriations table for this session. And those bills, depending on what happens financially, could wind up still passing as well. So we'll get into a few of those as well. Now, in terms of big issues for this session, we'll take them one at a time. So, one of the biggest issues in education that we will continue to be dealing with this session is school construction. We have three main issues that really are in play here. So first, I'm going to talk about the Governor's Commission on School Construction. This is something that has been ongoing for more than a year at this point. This is real stakeholders from all across the state. Superintendents are involved, school board members, many different groups have all been working together on this commission that was formed by the governor and really looking at the future of school construction in our state. As we all know, we're really facing, as local districts, a real school construction crisis. We know so many districts that are dealing with really dire infrastructure situations, and there is a real need for renovation and for new schools within our state in order to make sure that our kids they are safe, they are healthy, they are in places that are hygienic, that are good for learning, that are modern and vibrant places that they can enjoy. So that commission is actually its work is still ongoing. They released a report earlier this year, but they will have their full report out. It's projected by the end of January, and we expect that report to really be a driver of what ultimately happens legislatively around school construction. It could really have a big role in determining what happens legislatively. Now, at the same point, there is a bill that has been carried over from the last session, LD 1892. This is a bill around school construction, and this bill is the Education Committee has described it as its kind of vehicle for school construction legislation. So this bill will ultimately probably be used for many of the changes around school construction, whether that's kind of how things will be determined, what projects ultimately get priority, how funding works, those sorts of things. Those will ultimately get included in LD 1892. And there have been lots of discussions around this, but I think things are still up in the air around what ultimately ends up in this bill until there's more discussion. And there certainly will be quite a bit in the next session. We're expecting more work sessions on this bill, more discussions with lawmakers and groups like ourselves around what ultimately happens here. Now, at the same point, there is also another bill that actually had a public hearing only last month. This is LD 1312. And this is a bill that is actually, if it passed, it would use revenue, about 50% of the revenue from interest that is generated by the state's rainy day fund. So currently, that's the fund that is there for if the state is facing a real financial emergency. And that is currently at its statutory maximum right now. It's over $1 billion. It's really at that maximum level. And when that rainy day fund is at its maximum level, this bill would take any interest generated by this, which is currently around 30 to 40 million per year. This bill would take half of that and put it towards school construction, potentially school renovation. This is a bill that we supported in committee, but also know that a whole lot more needs to be done as well. But it's encouraging to see that there are still, several paths that could really help to improve this process and hopefully get more support to our local districts in order to deal with this project that we are all feeling really across the state. Now, the other big issue that we are expecting to be talked about quite a bit this session is the school funding formula. So there's still a study ongoing. If you remember in the last session, NEPRI did a big study about the funding formula, looking at basically how equitable it is, looking at individual pieces of it, looking at ways in which it could be changed. From there, the legislature asked it to basically look at several individual pieces of the formula and to basically run some recommendations, get some more data on exactly how changes to a few of these pieces would ultimately affect the funding formula and what sort of resources our schools received. So some of the issues that are being looked at are things like special education and this kind of expenditure model that we currently have, and whether we need to look at a different model for how special education should be funded and what reimbursement ultimately looks like. Another thing that's being looked at is the regional index and the regional adjustment. These are ultimately helping to determine things like teacher salaries and areas like that. And then also looking at what factors are used to determine the subsidies and how much subsidy each different district ultimately receives. So as we all are aware, right now, property value is really used for a lot of this, but it's potentially looking at other factors and really particularly economically disadvantaged data and whether there's a place in that to help determine those subsidy amounts and what that ultimately looks like. So there are a lot of things still in play regarding this. We expect there to be more work sessions. What's ultimately required is that MEPRI will come back over the course of, I think at some point in January, they will come back with some recommendations regarding this. They've been working with the DOE on pieces around this, and we will ultimately learn more from them. And then that could serve as a way to potentially have more legislation come out from that. So that's still up in the air about what will ultimately come out, but we'll be watching that closely. You can also read the full study. I've linked it right here in our presentation to the MEPRI website. So keep an eye on that. Again, a big issue we are watching. A few other big issues. So we just wanted to highlight the minimum teacher salary bill. This is LD 34. This is still on the appropriations table, as we mentioned. That means it passed the House and the Senate and then was put on the appropriations table and is awaiting funding. And it would need that funding in order for it to ultimately get approved. This bill would increase the minimum teacher salary across Maine to $50,000 by 2029. And so we're going to be watching this one very closely to see what ultimately happens with this and whether it is able to get the requisite state funding that it needs in order to get this bill over the finish line. So we'll be watching this one quite closely. Other big issues, one big question around this is there more state funding available to help with a lot of these bills that we're talking about here? We're talking about financial things that do ultimately need more state funding. So is there much more state funding available? The relatively simple answer is that there will be some more money available. The state's Revenue Forecasting Commission, it recently met and it determined that there's about $250 million more estimated to be available than was originally projected. So that does mean that there should be some money there available for this session on potentially some of these priorities. However, there are a lot of legislative priorities that we'll probably be hearing about, things in DHHS, things in many different areas. You know, we always know Maine care is a big issue as well. So we expect that there to be lots more discussions regarding exactly how that funding will ultimately be allocated. But there will at least be some funding available, which could help to push some of these initiatives across. And we are expecting there to be a supplemental budget proposal from the administration, probably sometime in January is what we would guess for when we'd see that supplemental budget. And that's really where the administration proposes how it would use that additional funding that is expected to come through. But it'll ultimately be up to the legislature to decide what parts of the governor's proposal they agree with, what parts they don't. They'll need to come to some sort of agreement. So we'll see what ultimately happens there. Now, what else are we watching? Just a few other things we wanted to raise and bring your attention to. One is Chapter 115, teacher credentialing. The state board has been once again looking at this issue, and we expect that this to be another topic that ultimately does go before the education committee. This is an important issue that really will impact the ability of our schools to be able to hire the best educators that they can. So we'll certainly be in touch regarding that. LD 849, this is a bill around the recall of school board members. This bill was carried over from the last session. And we will stay in touch with you regarding this one as well. There have been lots of discussions regarding this about, whether there should be more proposals regarding this, but we'll be in touch regarding that. Another bill is a bill around teacher overtime. We were, very communicative with you all about this bill in the last session and about some of the concerns that we had in terms of really making Maine the only state in the country that would, allow for something like this, and really what it would mean for local CBAs, all sorts of questions regarding a bill like that one. That bill has also been carried over. So we will touch base with you all if we see what ultimately happens there. And then we also know that new bills can always pop up. While there are some limits on what new bills can come through, we do expect to likely see more over the course of the next few months. So we will certainly be in touch with you all about that, and particularly priority bills, bills of concern, the bills where we need you to help us with our advocacy. That is where we will really need your help. In the last session, you all really responded when we said, we need you to reach out to your legislators. We need you to make them aware of these particular issues. We would really ask you, we'll probably need more of that in this session. So we will be in touch regarding some of the bills that may ultimately make it further, and some bills that we may want, some bills that we may not want. So we'll be in touch regarding any of those. So now we did want to touch on just some of the other bills on the appropriations table as well, things that we're watching. So as we mentioned, the teacher minimum wage bill is on the appropriations table right now. There are also bills that would boost retired teacher health insurance. We viewed this as an important bill if they're able to happen, in order to really help our retired educators. That is an important issue. It's been an important issue for superintendents and school board members in order to ensure that our educators, are really seen as being valued by our state and our local communities. Few other things that are still on the appropriations table. One is around mental health supports in schools. This is LD 858. This has been a bill that we've really supported in years past in order to get more mental health funding and get mental health services for our kids who need them within schools. And then there's also a bill around training for ed techs as well. But with all of these, it's going to be the funding that ultimately determines what happens with these. So we'll be watching all of them very closely, and we'll really see what happens with any of these different bills. Now, I'd just like to give you a brief overview of how you can keep up over the course of the second legislative session. One way, you're already doing it. You're watching our weekly brief videos. You can also read our weekly brief emails. We would really ask you to please read those emails. Those are going to be the best way to stay up to date. We'll probably be sending out emails every week, maybe every 2 weeks over the course of the session, both providing you with updates on what's happening and how you can get involved, different ways that you can really be an advocate for public education and for your local school districts. This is always so important, and we so appreciate your help. And we'll be asking more of you over the course of the session. Another thing you can do, you can subscribe to our MSMA YouTube, which you are watching right now. If you are watching this, this will automatically make it so that if you hit that subscribe button, you'll get little notifications whenever we have new episodes out regarding this. So we think that that's a great tool as well if you want to stay up to date on the latest legislative news. And then also, we wanted to share a few links that we think would be helpful. One is our legislative dashboard link. Last year, we had passwords for this dashboard. This was kind of password protected, but we've actually removed those passwords. So now you can just go to that link right there. You can also find it on our MSSA and MSBA websites. If you go there and look up the MSSA legislative dashboard, the MSBA legislative dashboard, that will have everything you need to be up to date with what's happening. It has links to different bills that we're watching. It has a legislative calendar. It has ways that you can contact your local representatives, your local senators. All that sort of information is all in one place for you. It'll also have updates throughout the session with things that you can do. And so we'd really ask you to take advantage of that and to really bookmark that for you to be able to watch it over the course of the session. And then also, we also have another link. This is our bill tracking website that we continually update over the course of the session. This is kind of priority bill tracker. It keeps track of the bills that we're really closely watching, saying where they're at in the legislative process. You'll see on that page, there is both a link for, the new bills and where they're at, and then it still includes all the bills that were dealt with in the first legislative session that were priorities for our organizations. And it really lays out, which bills passed, which bills died, and takes you through that process. So we hope that that could be a useful tool for you as well. The real goal of all of this is to keep you informed over the course of the legislative session to make sure that you are aware of these bills. And then what we will ask of you is when we need your help, we will reach out. You will get emails from us, and we would ask you, please reach out to your local representatives, your local senators on these bills when we ask you to reach out. This is so important. They listen to their constituents. That really makes a really big difference. We are always here at MSMA, MSSA, MSBA. We are working with local legislators on issues, the education committee, but there's only so many places that we can be in any one time. And legislators really want to hear from their constituents, from their schools. They really value that sort of knowledge. So we would really ask you that when we are reaching out to you, please reach out to your legislators as well. This really is a two-way street that we view it as, and together we can be real strong advocates for public education in Maine. And then one other thing we did want to mention is that we are now offering legislative workshops as well for your school board if you'd like it. These workshops are basically designed as ways of helping your board to, understand the legislative process. We've done this for a few school boards already. I will head out there personally. I will head to your school board. I can also do it virtually if needed, and I can walk you through what the legislative process looks like, the ways that your board can be active, work best with your local legislator, and work best with MSBA as well. So we really hope that these legislative workshops can be helpful. You can learn more. That's right at the link right here on this page, and you can find it right on the MSBA website. Just look for school board professional development there. You can find a link to that as well. So we think that that's hopefully will also be a useful tool if your school board does want to find ways to get even more involved in legislative work going forward. So that's all that we have for you right now. And we hope that this could be a helpful way for you to stay on top of everything as the legislative session gets underway. You will likely be hearing from me come the first or the second week of January. I'll have plenty more to share with you regarding what we're expecting in the next session. And for now, we hope that you have a wonderful winter break, and we'll talk with you soon. Thanks so much.